So another interlude. We had some more punch, and then the curate told us a story. I could not make head or tail of the curate's story, so I cannot retail it to you now. We none of us could make head or tail of that story. It was a good story enough, so far as material went. There seemed to be an enormous amount of plot and enough incident to have made a dozen novels. I never before heard a story containing so much incident, or one dealing with so many varied characters. I should say that every human being our curate had ever known or met or heard of was brought into that story. There were simply hundreds of them. Every 5 seconds he would introduce into the tale a completely fresh collection of characters, accompanied by a brand new set of incidents. This was the sort of story it was. Well, then, my uncle went into the garden and got his gun, but of course it wasn't there, and Scroggins said he didn't believe it. Didn't believe what? Who's Scroggins? Scroggins, oh, why, he was the other man, you know. It was his wife. What? What was his wife? What's she got to do with it? Why, that's what I'm telling you. It was she that found the hat. She had come up with her cousin to London. Her cousin was my sister-in-law, and the other niece had married a man named Evans, and Evans, after it was all over, had taken the box round to Mr. Jacobs's, because Jacobs's father had seen the man when he was alive, and when he was dead, Joseph... Now look here. Never you mind Evans and the box. What's become of your uncle and the gun? The gun? What gun? Why, the gun that your uncle used to keep in the garden and that wasn't there. What did he do with it? Did he kill any of these people with it? Because these Jacobses and Evanses and Scrogginses and Josephises... Because if so, it was a good and useful work, and we should enjoy hearing about it. No, oh no, how could he? How could he? He had been built up alive in the wall, you know, and when Edward the Fourth spoke to the abbot about it, my sister said that in her then state of health she could not and would not, and you know, it was endangering a child's life, and so they christened it Horatio after her own son, who'd been killed at Waterloo before he was born. And Lord Napier himself said, "Look here, do you know what you're talking about?" We asked him at this point. He said no, but he knew it was every word of it was true, because his aunt had seen it herself, whereupon we covered him over with a tablecloth and he went to sleep. And then Uncle told us a story. Uncle said his was a real story. The Ghost of the Blue Chamber, my uncle's story. "I don't want to make you fellows nervous," began my uncle in a peculiarly impressive, not to say blood-curdling tone of voice, "and if you would rather that I did not mention it, I won't, but as a matter of fact, this very house in which we are now sitting is haunted." "You don't say that," exclaimed Mr. Coombes. "What's the use of your saying I don't say it when I have just said it?" retorted my uncle somewhat pettishly. "You don't talk so foolish. I tell you the house is haunted. Regularly, on Christmas Eve, the Blue Chamber," they called the room next to the nursery the Blue Chamber, at my uncle's, most of the toilet service being of that shade, "is haunted by the ghost of a man who once killed a Christmas waif with a lump of coal." "How did he do it?" asked Mr. Coombes with an eager anxiousness. "Was it difficult?" "I do not know how he did it," replied my uncle. "He did not explain the process. The waiter had taken up position just inside the front gate and was singing a ballad. It was presumed that when he opened his mouth for a B-flat, the lump of coal was thrown in by the sinful man from one of the windows, and it went down the waiter's throat and choked him." "You want to be a good shot, but it's certainly worth trying," murmured Mr. Coombes thoughtfully. "But that was not his only crime, alas," added my uncle. "Prior to that he had killed a solo cornet player." "No, is that really a fact?" exclaimed Mr. Coombes. "Of course it's a fact," answered my uncle testily. "At all events, as much as a fact as you can expect to get in a case of this sort." "How very captious you are this evening." The circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. The poor fellow, the cornet player, had been in the neighbourhood barely a month. Old Mr. Bishop, who kept the Jolly Sandboys at the time, and from whom I had the story, said he had never known a more hard-working and energetic solo cornet player. He, the cornet player, only knew 2 tunes, but Mr. Bishop said the man could not have played with more vigour or for more hours in a day if he had known 40. The 2 tunes he did play were Annie Laurie and Home Sweet Home, and as regarded his performance of the former melody, Mr. Bishop said that a mere child could have told what it was meant for. This musician, this poor friendless artist, used to come regularly and play in this street just opposite for 2 hours every evening. One evening he was seen, evidently in response to an invitation, going into this very house, but was never seen coming out of it. "Did the townsfolk try offering any reward for his recovery?" asked Mr. Coombes. Not a halfpenny, replied my uncle. Another summer, continued my uncle, a German band visited here, intending, so they announced on their arrival, to stay till autumn. On the second day from their arrival, the whole company, as fine and healthy a body of men as one could wish to see, were invited to dinner by this sinful man, and after spending the whole of the next 24 hours in bed, left the town a broken and dyspeptic crew, the parish doctor who had attended them giving it his opinion that it was doubtful if they would, any of them, be fit to play an air again. You don't know the recipe, do you? Asked Mr. Coombes. Unfortunately, I do not, replied my uncle, but the chief ingredient was said to have been railway refreshment room pork pie. I forget the man's other crimes, my uncle went on. I used to know them all at one time, but my memory is not what it was. I do not, however, believe I am doing his memory an injustice in believing that he was not entirely unconnected with the death and subsequent burial of a gentleman who used to play the harp with his toes, and that neither was he altogether unresponsible for the lonely grave and an unknown stranger who had once visited the neighbourhood, an Italian peasant lad, a performer upon a barrel organ. Every Christmas Eve, said my uncle, cleaving with low impressive tones, the strange awed silence that, like a shadow, seemed to have slowly stolen into and settled down upon the room, the ghost of this sinful man haunts the Blue Chamber in this very house. There, from midnight till cockcrow, amid wild, muffled shrieks and groans and mocking laughter, and the ghostly sound of horrid blows, it does fierce phantom fight with the spirits of the solo cornet player and the murdered wait, assisted at intervals by the shades of the German band, while the ghost of the strangled harpist plays mad ghostly melodies and ghostly toes on the ghost of a broken harp. Uncle said the Blue Chamber was comparatively useless as a sleeping apartment on Christmas Eve. Hark! Said Uncle, raising a warning hand towards the ceiling while we held our breath and listened. Hark! I believe they are at it now, in the Blue Chamber. Dun, dun, dun. To be continued tomorrow. Take care, everybody.